Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today I'm excited to share with you a card project that I designed for the PaperArtsy blog. And today we're going to be exploring PaperArtsy fresco finish chalk acrylic paints and also how to use Eclectica word stamps to create a collage background. When you get done watching today's video, I invite you to pop on over to the PaperArtsy website. They're over at paperartsy.co.uk. Give yourself plenty of time because their website is loaded with tons of different tips and tricks and video tutorials, all accessible on their blog and on their YouTube channel. In the meantime, enjoy today's show. Today I'm excited to show you 3 different ways to use word and quote stamps. And today I'm working with the Eclectica ESN 16 stamp set to create this card. And the 3 techniques that we're going to look at today: first of all, to use word and quote stamps to create a collage background. You guys know I love this technique. Second, to mask off words from a quote stamp to get just a single word or sentiment. And finally, to use word and script stamps to stamp onto German scrap and create kind of an antique look embellishment on here. So let's get started with our background. And first I wanted to point out a couple of things about the background. It's got lots of layers going on, but it is completely flat. The first layer is a beautiful blue, mermaid blue, fresco finished chalk acrylic paint. It's absolutely the most perfect shade of blue I think I've ever found. I have that as my background. Then I've done my collage stamping with the words on top. And then I've added bubble wrap stamping and some spattering and edging with fresco finish vanilla chalk acrylic paint. Finally, as I'm tilting this, I think you can see the shine on here. Well, that's because I coated the entire piece with clear gloss embossing powder. Really easy techniques to do. So let's start with doing the background. I'm going to bring in a piece of glossy white cardstock. I used glossy for this, although you can use a matte cardstock. It's going to give you a slightly different effect. And then I'll bring in my mermaid fresco finish chalk acrylic paint. And you'll notice that this is opaque. This is such a gorgeous color. This color is probably my favorite. It just makes me really happy. I just think it's such a stunning color. So I've just squeezed a little bit of it out onto my glossy cardstock, and I'm coming in with an old hotel key card. So you can use one of these to apply the paint. Now I'm not using a brush because I want kind of a random, not total coverage effect. I just want to scrape on some of this color. And then I've got my piece painted. So I've got some white areas on here. You'll notice I've also got a little bit of peaky areas here too. Because this is glossy cardstock, it's not going to absorb the paint. So I can either let it dry like so, or I can take advantage of those raised areas and bring in another piece of glossy cardstock. Just press the 2 together and then separate them. And I have 2 backgrounds that I can choose from. I'm going to use this one here and set both of them aside to dry for a minute, and then I can come back and do my stamping. My piece is all dry now, so I can start stamping on it. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things with the stamping. As I mentioned, I put all of my stamps onto one clear acrylic flexi block. And this is also from PaperArtsy too. It's a nice size of block, but it's also a thin block as well. So it's easier to handle. Now the stamps that I'm working with are the ESN 16 stamp set, and this is the Eclectica line. And this is one that's fondly referred to as the Lady Mary from Downton Abbey stamp set. Also the Parisian Lady, I've heard it called that too. And these are probably the 2 stamps that you'd think would be the most obvious to use. But I'm, instead of using these 2, which I love, I'm going to combine all of these other elements on here. So I have some little bits from postcards. I've got some other little snippets on here, some French text from an old exercise book that I found at a flea market, a beautiful quote by our master John Keats, and then a really nice supporting statement down here as well. So these are the elements that I'm going to use, and I'll save Lady Mary or the Parisian Lady for another time around. So I've arranged all of my stamps that I want to use onto the clear acrylic block, and then I'll go ahead and stamp it on here. Now you may be wondering, how do you play with the positioning of this? And here's one of my secrets for this. I use an old sheet protector, and I arrange my elements onto the acrylic block stamp it onto an old sheet protector. They're really inexpensive. And then I can play with the positioning, and I can say, oh no, I need to straighten this, or I need to move this one over. So you can play around with this a little bit too. If you saw my other video on stamping on acetate, then you know you can also stamp on acetate and actually use that as another layer. So I wanted to offer that to you as another tactic for stamping. So then what I'm going to do is go ahead and ink up my stamp, and I'm using the Jet Black Archival ink for this. You can use whatever black ink pad you have on hand. I like the Jet Black Archival for this because it has such a nice crisp color to it. And then I'm just going to stamp this all as one unit. So I need to stamp fairly firmly. I want to make sure, especially since there's not a stamp down here, that I'm not rocking or tilting this a whole lot, but that I'm making sure to get nice, even pressure with my hand and lift off. And it looks like I could have done better maybe standing up to hit these areas in here, but not to worry, because I'm actually going to be adding some paint on top of this, so it's really not so much of a problem. I do need to let this ink dry, and I might even just zap it with a heat tool to make sure it's completely dry before I add the vanilla paint on top, because otherwise it can smear. So I do have a piece that is already stamped and ready to go, and I can go ahead and start painting on this. So with this, I'm using the Fresco Finish in Vanilla, and I'm going to bring in two little palettes because I want a diluted vanilla and an undiluted vanilla. So here are my coffee can lids that I use as a palette. Here's going to be a little bit for the diluted, and then I'll add in some of this, which will be undiluted. And the vanilla is also an opaque. It's a gorgeous color, and this is one of the most versatile of the Fresco finishes, I think. So I'm going to spritz in a little bit of water here and get my stipple brush loaded with watery vanilla. The reason I want watery diluted vanilla is because it's easier to spatter. So I'm just going to spatter this all over, pick up a little bit more, and add some more of this beautiful vanilla on here. And I think you can see, especially around here, whoops, as I put my finger into it, that I'm spattering this. So then I can set that bit aside, and I can add in some more of the undiluted. Now with this, I'm going to be painting on some bubble wrap and using bubble wrap as my stamp. So I've got just a plain flat brush here, and I'll just paint this on to the bubbly side of my bubble wrap, and then come in and do some up here, some here, some down here, just randomly. Now, if you find that you've obliterated part of the words on here that you really wanted to show, you can also come in and kind of blot off some of that too. So you can bring in a really lovely old towel like that I have on hand in my studio all the time and blot some of that if you want to. Then the last part of this is going to be taking this brush and edging around all four sides, again with the vanilla, so that I get a nice border on here. So come around here, try not to smear it all over, and come along the side, and then finally here at the bottom. Okay, and then I just need to let this set aside to dry, and I can come in and do my embossing. My paint is dry, and I have all of my layers almost done on my background. So I've got that beautiful mermaid blue, I have my stamping, I have the vanilla, and now I'm ready for my clear gloss superfine embossing powder. And this is from Wow Embossing Powders, and this is a range I really, really like. So what I'm going to do is pop this onto a piece of scrap paper here. It's been folded in half. And then I'm going to take my Versamark watermark stamp pad. You can use whatever embossing ink you have on hand. And I'm pressing this onto my background, covering it completely. I really want to make sure that I've got complete coverage with that clear embossing ink, which can be a little bit tricky because it's clear. So you may want to go over it a couple of times like I do. And then simply pop this inside the folded piece and then sprinkle with this embossing, clear embossing powder. And you can kind of slide it down like so, so that it is completely covered. And then what you're going to do is go ahead and heat set this to get a really shiny embossed finish. And that embossed finish, let me slide this out of the way. This embossed finish is going to look like this. So you can see the shine on here. So I just need to heat set that with my heat tool. It will take a while because it's a big area to cover. So also be careful because it can get quite hot. And don't touch it while the embossing powder, until the embossing powder has cooled completely. So you go ahead and heat set that, and then your background is done. So then we can get into masking off one of the words in our stamped quote on here. So let me bring in a little piece of white glossy cardstock, and I'm using the stamp from the stamp set that says beauty is truth, truth, beauty. Now I only want this one word beauty on here. So here's how I'm going to ink this up. So I've got it onto my clear acrylic block, and the word that I want is this one right here. And you have to read a little bit backwards for this technique. So what I'm going to do is mask off all of these other areas, and you can use washi tape for this, you can use masking tape, you can use stencil tape, whatever you happen to have on hand. Clear tape also works. So I've just masked off all of these other words on here. And then I'm going to take my black ink pad, ink this up, and then remove this. It's a very important step on here, and one I've forgotten several times. And then I'm going to stamp. And then this way, I'm able to get just the single word. So this is just a nice technique to have on hand, because then you can use this for lots of different quote stamps that you might have. Now the last part that we're going to do is our German scrap butterfly. And this is just beautiful. And German scrap, if you haven't worked with it before, is just a really nice, sturdy, heavyweight metallic cardstock, and it's just got some beautiful detail on here. Now you can use it as is, but let me bring in the card and you can see the difference between the two. First of all, this looks a little bit more antiqued. This is very shiny. And of course, I've got my stamping on here. So how to do this? Well, you're going to take a little bit of the mermaid paint, mermaid fresco finish paint, and get this open. And you really don't need very much, just a little tiny bit. I use my fingers for this process, and I'm just going to rub a little bit on here. I'm not covering it completely. I just want it to look a little bit weathered, not completely blue. Okay, so really in the body area and extending out through those pretty wings. And this is textured. This is a textured piece of German scrap. So it actually will have some little inny areas in there where that paint will go. Then I'm going to bring in my beautiful old towel and just blot this. It dries really quickly, but it blots it. It really kind of gives it a nice antiqued effect, and also just helps to speed up the drying time. Okay, so now I have my slightly tarnished butterfly here, and I can stamp onto it. Now, for this one, you probably want to use either a StazOn or a Surfaces, some kind of permanent black ink, one that is not going to smear. And then you just need to grab onto whatever stamps you have and pop them up onto a block and stamp. So I'm going to take this really beautiful script stamp and ink this up, and then position it here on the wings, and look at that. Come down and turn it, use it another direction, and so on. And then you've got some beautiful texture onto those gorgeous butterfly wings. So let me slide this away. I'm going to kind of swoop this up as quickly as I can, and then bring in my card again so we can take another look at this. So on here, I've got this beautiful butterfly, and I stamped on it with a couple of the other border stamps as well. So I've got the script here, 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 and here, and then this little swoopy bit, which is this one right here, is also going across on there to add a little bit of light-dark balance. Then I've got this mounted up onto black cardstock and then put onto my white card. The beauty is tucked here underneath the butterfly wing. This has been mounted up onto a bit of black silk ribbon. There's some gold sparkly ribbon on here just wrapping around the card front itself. And there you have it, using Eclectica word stamps for a collage background. masking off words and then also using it to create a beautiful butterfly embellishment. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much to PaperArtsy for inviting me to be part of their blog. For more inspiration and to check out the Eclectica stamps, please stop by the PaperArtsy website at paperartsy.co.uk. And since you're here on YouTube, I'd love if you subscribe to Studio SN, and I will bring you a new video every Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining me on Studio SN, and I'll see you again next time.